Cool people doing cool shit. Sounds pretty cool, doesn't it?
All right, I'm here today with Blake Bickel in his living room, which I'll let you talk about it, but Blake is a musician, a mastering engineer, and recently I discovered a manufacturer of boutique effects pedals.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Being a creative person, it helps me to have a bunch of different outlets, especially when making a living off of them, because the inconsistencies and ebbs and flows. If one thing mellows out a little bit, I'll shift to something else, and I can kind of dance around and juggle the various outlets there. I mean, that's definitely also related to my ADD for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's fun.
That's funny. That's one of the jokes that I make at my own expense is that, I've got this big commercial photo studio, but like at this point, one entire shooting bay looks like a pretty decent sized rock band is set up to play a club gig.
Yeah.
And that just stays set up, and that's either like really good or really bad ADHD management. And I can't decide. Depends on the day. It probably depends on what deadlines I have staring me in the face.
Correct.
Whether it's good or bad. But yeah, I think it seems like almost all of us creative types have some version of something like that. I just saw someone online, like a doctor, talking about ADHD, and it said it's presented all wrong because it's presented as a disorder, right?
Yeah.
And yes, it causes challenges that other people maybe don't have. However, it's also your greatest strength, because at our age, most people are all done being legitimately curious about the world. And that's one of the biggest ones, is that what looks like lack of focus is actually an undying curiosity.
Absolutely.
And so anyway, that works out well, that in my situation, but in yours too, like either you get burned out or that, gets lighter in terms of workload, and then you can jump over here.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
pretty awesome. Do you find that ebb and flow between the three things that we're talking about right now, does that kind of even it out and squash the peaks and valleys, or do you find like two of the three, if not all, are peaking and then they all tank?
No, I mean, definitely it's not like a cure-all solution, but it's rare that they're all hot at the same time.
Yeah.
The mastering business has a lot of serious ebbs and flows, where it's like at points I'll be booked out for 3 months in advance, and then as that ramps down, things go really quiet. And the pedals that I build is kind of just that has a pretty consistent rate. So when things start slowing down, I can jump to that and, for example, build a bunch of backstock of pedals. So I just have them, or make demo videos, or just kind of marketing material to have on hand that I can, as time goes, ration out. So it's definitely not a perfect system, but I can balance things a lot better. It definitely makes things significantly better to to kind of have something where I can shift my attention that feels most effective. Sometimes maybe I'll be in the middle of being slammed with mastering, but have an idea for a pedal and then want to be down in the basement tinkering and breadboarding and building, prototypes, but I just take lots of notes and try to not forget about stuff.
Are you someone that would like blow off mastering to go down in the basement and do that, or you stay focused but just make sure that you write down what you were thinking so that you can come back to it?
A little bit of both.
Uh-huh.
I mean, because my energy and excitement feels like it comes in waves. Certain things, I feel a wave of excitement, and I know if I catch that wave and ride it out, I can go for a long time. But having experience with it, also know I can easily neglect obligations, especially when it's the mastering business I love, and it's a passion of mine, but it's a business, and it's how I feed my family. So I know that's a priority. You got to stay on top of it. So it's not a challenge, but I definitely at times indulge myself.
How did you get into mastering? Because that doesn't seem like an automatic, like I love music, boom, I'm a mastering engineer. It seems like there'd be several steps to
it was definitely a process. I think I started off playing music and being just absolutely obsessed with it and just loving all aspects of it. And myself and the friends I had at the time, let's record ourselves, and built a little home studio. And then I was just down in that studio 24/7. I didn't get into music till later in life, or for me, I didn't really pick up an instrument till I was 19. And at that time was surrounded by musicians that, compared to myself, were just way more advanced. And I had a lot of friends that were excited about the recording space I had, and hadn't got into recording. So at the time in my mind, I was like, well, this would be a way I could be involved in music, and do something with it, because maybe I'm not the greatest musician. So I got way into that. Home studios, started working at, established recording studios. At a point was managing and helped build a studio, a very professional facility. Kind of found that little niche where I was like, well, there's, mastering is an absolutely, critical part of making a professional recording. Not a lot of people do it. And so my curiosity got sparked, and I just kind of figured it out. I think one of the reasons I zeroed in on it is I felt I was decent at it. I felt I was good at it, whereas mixing bands, I can go in circles. But with mastering, there's you have limits, because most often you're working with a stereo file.
Mm-hmm.
And those limits were kind of refreshing. Yeah, it just there's definitely decisions I made to get there, but also things naturally kind of flowed in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think I've been, I put myself out there as, exclusively as a mastering engineer somewhere around 17 years ago. And I'll still do recording. my own music, and from time to time a friend's band if it's the right situation. But my strengths are definitely in mastering at this point. That's just where my mind and ears and that's just where I'm most comfortable.
So my first question as to you as a mastering engineer is, when I go do a car test, why do my mixes always suck? Like, why am I out in my car 8 times after I think I'm done?
Yes,
Is
I mean
really
that's
the point.
That's mastering. Not solely, but that's a huge aspect of mastering, is taking a project and, you know, the average listener doesn't realize how different a mix will sound from system to system, because they're familiar with the music. They're listening to the hook. They're not, the average consumer and listener isn't super focused on the balance and the way the snare is cutting. But when you're a musician or an audio engineer, you start to pick up on those differences, because it's the music you're creating. So for me, I feel a lot of the mastering process is, it's like the whole cohesive, sparkling finishing touches on the presentation, but a lot of it is balancing out frequencies, stereo field, dynamics, to narrow the margins and the differences that you will hear from system to system. And cars are notoriously just very challenging to make a really good sound, you know, just because it's a compact space and things are bouncing off all the surfaces, you know. For example, in my car, I dialed in and calibrated my stereo system, because if I just go with the stock settings, my ear's picking up on the left side is louder. Well, yeah, that's because I'm on the driver's side. I'm going to set the stereo to my taste, so I balance it and shift things to the right a little bit, and you know. But I mean, that's just a quick example. But yeah, cars are always a challenge. But once something is mastered, the differences are significantly less. But that's, you know, and that's, when I was working as a mixing engineer, I mean, that was always the standard outside reference point, is like, well, what does it sound like in the car? And it's just because of that, because it's if something's off, you're gonna hear it in the car for sure.
Well, even just this morning before I came here, I had something mixed, and you know, it's just one-offs. It's just fun. So I'm not gonna seek out a professional to finish it, but and you know, and I want to ask you about this too, but I have some of the software that's supposedly mastering software, and it does definitely improve it from the mix. But when I go out and car test it, like for instance, the song I'm thinking of today, the clarinet, which is a hard instrument to mix, which is probably why people generally play saxophone, because it cuts through a mix better. But out in the car, the clarinet's not even present, and neither is the backing vocal, which is a harmony under the melody. And then, of course, in the Instagram era, I was going to post a video of that, and on my phone, that mix is like, it sounds like the backing vocal is now the lead vocal, and the lead vocal is like way, all you can hear is the echo track.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yep.
And going from that little unit to the car and then to the studio monitors.
It drives you crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I I love
So do you just shoot
sound.
for the middle, or
I mean,
or is there an ideal that does actually work?
I mean, that's
properly?
that's the challenge, and I think one of the things that keeps me interested and passionate about mastering is that every project is different. There is no preset, this is what you do to finish the project. Because every album, every song has different instruments and performed in a different way and recorded by a different person and mixed by a different person. Like, just so many variables that it keeps you on your toes. What you're describing to me sounds like challenges within this phase in the stereo field. A lot of phones, for example, I mean, they're getting better, but a lot of phones play sound back in mono, or they'll claim it's stereo, but it's two little speakers right there that might as well be mono. You know what I mean? So things will cancel out or lay on top of each other in certain frequencies, and things in the stereo field will get exaggerated and almost doubled, where other things can almost get canceled. So, you know, when I'm mastering a project, I try to get a sense of what the project is and what I have to work with. And oftentimes I'll refer back to, if it's an established artist, listen to their other material and what do I feel the focus of this is. Because the same with mixing things, you can't make if it's a big complicated mix, you can't make everything cut perfectly just the way you want. You have to make choices and prioritize things. So I'll listen to the project, do some research, and do what I feel is going to best serve the project. And sometimes that means making executive decisions. But I always feel it's important to go with my gut, present it to the client so they can hear what I'm talking about. Because if I just ask them before doing something, talking about sound is almost impossible.
Yeah.
To hear it and experience the different things. So oftentimes I'm just going with my gut and then present it to the client. And this is what I came up with. What do you think?
As a mastering engineer, where your ears are how you make money, how is it that you play in such a loud band like that? I've been in the studio with producers who, even though their room is protected, an ambulance goes by outside and they do this to make sure that nothing happens to their ears.
I definitely.
And you're out there making my ears ring, even though I brought my nice earplugs to the show.
Yeah. I always use ear protection when I play, and anytime I go to a concert. Maybe that's part of why I play so loud too. Is because, I like to feel the music. For me, that's in the music that I play. That's an important aspect. But a lot of times, even when I'm performing, sometimes our band will bring earplugs and just be like, "Hey, you should put these in. We're doing it." But it's really strange. It's like the psychoacoustic phenomena where your brain calibrates itself and calibrates your ears. Another example would be things were starting to sound kind of dull in one of my ears, and I was panicking. And turns out I had significant wax buildup, and almost like a blockage in one of my ears, and got it removed. And for like a week and a half, that ear was so incredibly sensitive to just like, but I'd been mastering records. Things sounded fine. Like there was a near blockage, but my brain and my ear like calibrated it to get by and function. Pulled it out once it was out, and I didn't master any records. I pushed my schedule back for like till things sounded right, but a week and a half later it recalibrated and things sounded right again. But so I guess what I'm saying with this is, when I first started using ear protection, it freaked me out, and I was like, this sounds like garbage. Everything's muddled and like dark, and nothing is cutting. But if you just do it really quickly, your brain calibrates to that. At least mine does. I'm assuming most everyone else's does. And I assume most everyone else who has yet to use ear protection or try that when they first did, they'd be like, this doesn't sound good. But I would recommend it. Ears are important.
I don't notice it too bad, but I have tinnitus. It's worse in this ear, which is ironically the ear that like if you're talking to me, I do need to make sure that, like, if I was sitting like this, I would have a harder time understanding what you just said than if I was sitting like this.
Yeah.
And the tinnitus is absolutely because I played and went to shows without earplugs in.
Yeah.
Which, at this age, there's all kinds of things where you could beat yourself up about having done
just
to yourself.
go back
But yeah, now that they're just permanently on my keychain so that I can't even have left them in the car. And shows like yours, I was really glad to have them. Because I also am someone who wants to feel the music. So that does usually mean that it needs to be very loud.
Yeah.
And from a frequency standpoint, I've noticed that, at least for me, and I think I've discussed it with other people, and it seems to hold true for a lot of people, is that the songs that really get me emotionally always have a well-represented low frequency aspect to it.
Absolutely.
That doesn't mean like the rhythm section is like all in your face or anything like that, but for sure, like the real low frequencies got to play a part in the role. And I know that in a lot of mastered stuff, again, your brain calibrates even when you listen to the song. So like a band that I would think is a huge rhythm section band, like Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
Like you feel all that stuff, but then if you're coming from a tracking session and then you listen to a band like that in the car, you're like, well, wait a second, there's like nothing below 100 hertz on this mix, and somehow I feel like that's still a big kick drum. And so how do you do that from a mastering standpoint? Because those frequencies, those are rolled off quite often.
Yeah, I mean, it's finding a happy medium where a lot of people can't hear music under, say, 20 hertz, but you can feel it. Most stereo systems, and definitely most consumer stereo systems, the frequency response of their systems are rolling off at 75 hertz, or if it's like a bookshelf speaker, somewhere around 100. And same on the top end, no one's gonna really be hearing over 20K, but most people it's around 16K, but most speakers aren't going to be really reproducing anything in that, above 20K. Usually it's below, but there's still a quality of a felt sound where you're not necessarily perceiving it. But for example, when I'm mastering, it comes up more often with the low end, but than the high end. But I have a set, I have my working speakers, which are a full range. Will capture and reproduce beyond what is really needed. But then I have my bookshelf reference speakers that are rolled off on either end of the spectrum. And I want to make sure, and I'll toggle when I feel I'm getting close, I'll flip it over to those speakers and make sure that the low end that I'm hearing and feeling, say it's a bass guitar, isn't relying just on those frequencies below 100K, that I can still hear it, and the sound of the instrument is still there and present, and that I'm not leaning on those sub-low frequencies to represent that instrument. Yeah, it's important to make sure that they're going to sound good on a bookshelf speaker as well as the full range system, because you want the sound and instruments to be represented there, but I know that a bookshelf pair of speakers is not going to do what a full system with a subwoofer is going to reproduce.
Right. So we talked about how loud your band is, but tell me about your band.
My band is called Bronson Arm, and it's a two-piece band. I play baritone guitar, and my friend Garrett Yates plays drums. We have a lot of fun, and it was, my main drive is just having fun and having an outlet. And of course, performing in front of people is a natural high. And I love doing it and sharing it. And at least so far, it's been, people have responded it in a positive way to a degree that I did not expect. And we're just keeping, if you're going to ride it as far as it goes, and just keep doing it as long as it's fun, which it is.
Are there challenges? I mean, I'm a huge fan of Charles Lee Asprey, so I'm a little bit already, I don't know what the word is, but I'm familiar with how good a two-piece can be. And also I've seen you guys. But are there challenges to being a two-piece band? For example, how do you not make that sound thin, like you're missing some stuff?
The way I am working around that with this project is, it was a development. I didn't do it from the get-go, but where I'm at now, I wired first of all, I'm playing a baritone instrument. So that covers a lot of low end that a guitar wouldn't. I've, at this point, wired the instrument to have a stereo output. So each pickup is its own independent channel. And then it runs out to a pedal board and has two independent pedal paths, which I can sculpt and shape. And one goes to a guitar stack and one goes to a bass stack. And I treat them in my mind like one's a bass and like one's a guitar. Of course, they're being played simultaneously, so it's not like there's two separate instruments, but at least the sonic territory they're taking up is exaggerated and significantly wider than a traditional mono instrument or just a bass or just a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how long have you guys been doing that?
We started jamming together just before pandemic hit. And I think we played, like a 15-minute set at a house show a week before shutdown.
Mm.
Played our first set, really excited and surprised by the response. And then there was no shows for a very long time. So we decided at that point to keep busy and just continue writing material, recording it, making videos, sharing it in other ways. Once things opened up, I think we were so excited to play, we didn't really write new material for a while. We were just excited with just getting out and playing and meeting other bands, making connections in different states, different cities, and just having fun. And we have a lot of new stuff in the pipeline. We have some new material being released the beginning of next year.
Oh, cool.
And in addition to that, I have another full length that's been recorded, and I'm putting finishing touches on and then sending it off to be mixed. So trying to get in a habit of constantly be creating new material, and when something's being released, there's already something else that's ready to start figuring out how to release it, who to release it with, and how we're going to do that.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me, and I think I intuited this like the first minute I saw you and talked to you for a second, but at a show, but and just let me know your thoughts on this, but you are a really soft-spoken guy, and the music is absolutely the opposite of that. Do you think that's a coincidence, or do you think there's something there?
I mean, it's clearly some form of outlet where I can feel comfortable putting out that energy. Yeah, I mean, I haven't put too much thought into it. It's just what feels right when I'm performing. I'm into and have played in bands that cover a very wide spectrum of sound. Writing the melodic and structures of the songs, and being solely responsible for it, not having a bass player or a lead player or somebody else to like help. Like, I have to do it's easiest to do what comes naturally, and that has always just been relatively heavy, aggressive music. One thing that I've always not felt conflicted about, but been concerned about, is that I think a lot of people will think of heavy, aggressive, and loud music as being angry or whatever, filled with negativity and hate, and that's definitely not the case with the music that at least the intent behind what I'm putting out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely more about strong emotions, but not necessarily, more often than not negative.
That's really interesting, because that, in a live setting, I'm not really going to be able to understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But that's a really interesting point, because metal, or whatever you want to call heavy music, is usually skews toward anger.
Yeah.
Specifically male anger.
Yeah.
Which, one, gets boring.
Yeah.
But you can't deny the riff.
Yeah.
And
there's an energy behind it for sure. Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's not where you're going lyrically.
Correct. And I mean, if you're not into the general sound we're putting out, it would probably all sound the same to you. But I think if you're into that kind of music, you would see and catch on that we cover a variety of different sounds. Like I have played in, punk bands and heavier bands where it felt like we relatively quickly zeroed in on like a sound and a vibe.
Mm. And then you just stayed
And
there.
then it was like, well, we can't, that's a great song, but it's not really our vibe.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Like it like backed us into a corner
Mm-hmm.
where it was incredibly limiting.
Yeah.
So one thing that was important to me about Bronson Arm was covering a wide variety of sounds. To me, that means tempos and dynamically, and have songs that maybe it's a minute and a half, throwing your fists in the air, banging your head banger, and then have like a 6-minute long, really slow burning, dirgy thing that takes, requires more out of the listener to be patient with and experience, because I don't want to back us into a corner, especially being a two-piece. I've wanted to make sure we don't back ourselves into a thing that is like, oh, that's a good song, but it's not a Bronson Arm song. I want it to be pretty open.
Let's talk about the pedals.
Yeah.
Why did you start building pedals?
I got into pedals because I was playing in a band, and I was playing bass, and we were recording, and I couldn't find a pedal that did what I wanted it to do, which at the time was to add a little bit of drive and breakup to the sound that I was already creating. I was like, I like my sound. I just want to break up just a little bit more. I'm not really able to do it the way I want to through my amp. And at the time, I worked at a music store and had access to borrow anything. And I did. I borrowed everything. I was like, I can't find a pedal that... I found pedals that absolutely would break up just a little bit, but on a bass guitar, they would cut out all the low end.
Mm.
And then I would go through all the pedals that were designed for bass guitar, and I was like, okay, the low end's there, but right out of the gate, the gain is all the way down, and it's already driving it and coloring the sound too much. It's too heavy-handed, and maybe it's breaking up the sound a little bit, but it's altering the feel and depth of the sound in a way that's just too heavy-handed. So I found a way I was like, well, I'm just gonna build one. And I forced myself to figure it out. And it took, now that I'm into it, I'm like, oh yeah, it's not rocket science, but it definitely takes patience and things pick up and move. But I figured out how to do that, how to build a pedal that will still retain the low end, still retain airy highs, and when the gain is all the way down, it sounds like the pedal's off. And you can slowly bring it up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Built that for myself, put out some prototypes to some friends, got some feedback, tweaked things a little bit, and then started selling them. And I'm really bad at blowing my own horn or marketing. It's not something I'm terribly...
What's the name of the pedal company?
Emerald Circuits.
Emerald Circuits. And where can people buy those?
I do have a storefront. Majority of my sales are through Instagram and word of mouth. I have 5 different pedals that I make that at any given point are out of stock or in stock, but I continue making them. And most of it's word of mouth, because it's a very saturated market. Everyone knows, if you're a musician, everyone knows somebody that's building pedals. So I think one of the things when I got into building them was kind of doing an anti-industry standard, industry establishment kind of approach, where the advice being given to me when I was like, oh, I think I want to, start a company and make these and sell them. The advice I was getting was like, oh, you got to have really good graphics, a really catchy name, and label things on the gain like the Annihilator or the Crusher, like things that I didn't feel comfortable doing. So I kind of did just the opposite in almost every aspect. People were telling me like, affordable components, really small boxes, so they fit on people's pedal boards, and this is how you do it. And I was just like, well, I'm going to make them big. I'm not going to label anything. I'm going to go with the most expensive components I can find. And I'm not going to try and make them under $100. They're going to be what they are based on how much time I put into them and materials cost. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess that's the thing, is like, create what you want, mm-hmm. which maybe is selfish and not the smartest business decision, but I mean, it brings me joy.
I feel like if you actually looked historically at most things, that is the advice that would be given to someone who just decides to make what they want, is that it's a bad business decision, it's selfish, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And the things that actually take off are the things that people made, and they didn't care if you came along or not. They're just like, no, I needed to make this because I wasn't hearing this, so I had to make this. Like an obvious example to me is, it's not in the pedal world, but when Willie Nelson wrote the Red-Headed Stranger album, the record company thought that was a demo just to show that he had some songs and now we can go record it.
Yeah.
He's like, no, that's the record.
Yeah.
And they really wanted him to redo it, and he's like, no, thank you. I already did it. Why would I do it again?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what took him from like a songwriter who some people knew also played, to being Willie
Nelson.
Yeah.
So
I think you did it exactly the right way, is my point.
Well, thank you. I mean, I feel good about it. I would feel better if I had lists of back orders, but I feel good about what I'm putting out there.
Yeah.
And the feedback I get is still surprisingly strong.
You said you made 5 pedals?
5 different models,
Are they all doing roughly the same thing, or they're doing distinctly different
They're all
things?
mainly gain pedals.
Oh, okay.
A lot of the modulation stuff that used to be pure analog is really difficult to pull off analog these days without it being insanely expensive.
Oh.
So a lot of it has moved to digital, and at least at this point where I'm at with it, I don't care to get into that just yet. So a lot of it's gain stuff and utility pedals. Like one of the pedals is a effects looper, bypass looper, kind of a routing pedal. But then I added in a feedback loop, which it's tough to real quick. It's a pedal that is a loop, like an effects loop on the back of an amplifier with a button. So it opens up a gate and a loop. I could put 10 pedals or just one pedal in that loop and engage or bypass all of them with one button, which I talk to a lot of experienced musicians that haven't even thought about that before. They're like, oh, I've always just get to that change and 1, 2, 3 real quick, get to my next part. So it has a practical use there. But I also added a function into it where it takes part of the looped chain on the return and feeds it back into the send. And it turns it into, well, it's really unpredictable. Certain reverb pedals, it'll turn, a short slapback reverb into this cavernous, rolling, weird glissando artifacts. And other pedals, like gain pedals, it'll turn a drive pedal into like a crushing fuzz pedal. But it's unpredictable, and you have to know how to route things because of phase and phase cancellation. But it's a really fun noise box. But most of my pedals are gain pedals. Boost, drive, distortion, fuzz. Basically I'm building things that I want, where it's like, distortion pedal is a distortion pedal, but every model, every different circuit has a different coloration and quality of, harmonic breakup, and I want that color palette at my disposal. So if I can figure out how to do a thing and do it well, then I'll put it out there.
Well, this has been great, and I love going down super nerdy wormholes, rabbit holes with people I respect.
Likewise, thank you.
So thank you very much. And again, Bronson Arm.
Dynamic Sound Service and Emerald Circuits.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.